Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, those of you that are watching. And of course, thank you to our guests, Yara and Vivian, who are joining us from Los Angeles at the very early hour of 6 a.m., I believe. So thank you. So maybe we'll just quickly introduce ourselves. So our names are Deborah and Hadin. We both have an office parade, and we were here 2 weeks ago and introduced by Sandra and Luke from UNP, which was really nice. We had a chat about our work, which kind of parallels their work. And you'll see that the work of FollyFeastLab, our guest today, also has similar but tangential and different approaches as well. So we thought it'd be nice to kind of make this connection. So to introduce our guests, Yara Feghali and Vivian El-Kmati, they're both female Lebanese architects and principals of FollyFeastLab. It's an experimental design studio based in Los Angeles. Their work foregrounds visually led, immersive, and interactive mixed reality experiences to address present social and urban themes, working with 3D scanning, AI, and game engines. Yara currently teaches design and technology at UCLA, interrogating the territories of architecture, education, and speculates on the role of emerging technologies in designing our environments using new media and storytelling techniques. Vivian is a designer and creative technologist, working with virtual reality, storytelling, and artificial intelligence technologies. She has led projects for Alex McDowell, Google R&D, World Building Media Lab at USC, Liam Young, and Architecture and Urban Design at UCLA. So thank you both for joining us. Feel free to take it away whenever you'd like and walk us through some of your work.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. It's great to always be in discussion and conversation with the two of you. So we're really excited that you thought about us. And I also agree that our work overlaps in more than one place. So as you said, we're FollyFeastLab, co-founded by myself, Yara Feghali, and Vivian. And we're originally trained as architects. And I think we both lean towards technology and gaming later on. And I teach at the University of California in Los Angeles in the Department of Architecture for a few years now. And I have also a background in design theory and pedagogy.
Okay. Hi. Yeah. Also, thank you so much for inviting us. It's great to be here. I hope you can hear me okay. It is early, so okay, so I'll go through it. I guess what we try, okay, so I think you figured, like, you kind of covered the basis of who we are and everything. And I just want to say that, like, we usually try at FollyFeast, basically our main kind of like meta, what we want to do in it is basically take architecture more as creating communities and like the spatial aspect of it. And what we try to do mostly is, so basically create digital spaces, whether this be in VR or in film, to connect over a common social political problem, and ultimately basically creating, like, whether it be an online community or a physical community, but this is mostly how we're kind of working in it. I think maybe Yara can share also, like, while we speak, you can share kind of some of our work. I guess that'd be good. Yeah. So maybe you want to start? Yeah, that's nice. Okay. I don't know. So should I? Okay. So I think our main kind of idea. Okay. I think our main ideas that we kind of we can touch up on. So we deal with mostly kind of social issues, and by that I mean, well, mostly social issues that we kind of like relate to. So they're usually either about the Mediterranean, Lebanese culture, or our queer culture. I think we try to kind of always stay true to those just because we know most about them and we're familiar with them, and it works like it comes up the realist way. Then the second one that we usually kind of deal with a lot is the urban theme, and I think by urban we mean usually that we like to take a block of, we think that the typology of how like the housing typology or an airport or anything kind of reflects a lot about the culture and reflects a lot about the community itself. And we like to discuss a little bit of like the specific characteristics of a neighborhood or the specific characteristics of an architecture. And instead of just thinking that it's like it looks really cool, I think it usually represents a little bit more, and that's what I think the project that Yara is showing right now was one where we dealt with this a lot. So that was just to go through it a little bit over it. So we basically took 20 houses from a couple of neighborhoods in around LA, and what we tried to do is to find kind of stereotypical elements in these neighborhoods that can kind of show queerness. And the idea was basically that when Yara and I kind of came to LA together, was basically like we were trying to figure out where do we belong, like how you walk around. LA is a big city. It's pretty kind of like overwhelming and intimidating if you're not familiar with it, I guess. And so the cool what we tried to do is basically recreate this like our journey from the airport to like our hotel, and kind of recreate it by like looking. So we were looking at like, oh, I know this, or I've seen this in a film. Oh, this is a queer sign. Oh, we have like actual people here. And I think from this like simple experience, we tried to recreate this and kind of bring all of these signs that we saw together. This was also kind of a projection. So you would have, in the exhibition, you would come in your car, sit inside your driver car seat, and watch the film like this picture, and you just watch it. And it's kind of, the main point was to kind of look like you are actually driving through it and feeling this journey. And I think this is one of the typical things, I would say. It kind of explains a lot where we try to go with this, which is basically connect people so multiple people can come experience the same thing, in which they feel like a community is starting to be communicated by just looking at kind of architectural elements, I guess.
One possible question, it will be on how technology does support or engage with this type of social political themes that you guys are interested. Could you please elaborate a little bit on that?
Yep. I think that's a great question. I love this question. I think, okay. Well, reality has a way of basically like, I think the 3D aspect and the virtual aspect comes to bring the fictional element. So in order to make something feel even like to kind of bring something out of the reality and highlight it, I think this is where technology for us comes in. So it comes to like, so instead of, if you go there and you just walk around, you might not notice these elements, right? Or you might not notice kind of these things that we're talking about. And I think where technology comes for us is basically, so we 3D scan and we do a photogrammetry of a certain thing. And I think this just highlights these specific elements that we want. And then having it be in a VR or a simulation, or in this case, just like a screen projection, I think these are what bring this element of, so we basically like to take it from reality, fictionalize it, and then bring it back to like a community of people where it will feel real because there's the social element again, and well, kind of create the cycle, I guess. So that's the main thing.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point that like we always start from a political interest. Like it always started from a social political interest, something that we're frustrated with, something that we don't want to talk about. And we see technology as something that produces you know, the environment and the realities and the stories that we want to talk about, but also the reason why we use game engine and photogrammetry is to relate to a larger audience. We want to, you know, to get more people involved in this kind of discussion. And if we restrict it to the language of architecture or a certain domain, it will stay within that. So it's really important for us to use tools that are accessible to many people. This is why we do VR, and Vivian in a bit will talk about networked VR, where we can really reach audiences across countries, across places, so we can have these very important discussions that we want to have about social and political theme. And usually our social and political theme are personal to us, as Vivian described. So they will be about Lebanon, about the Middle East, about what's happening there, and also about queer identity and about the things we go through as the people that we are.
Yep. So yeah, I think it said that. But so I think, yeah, just to summarize, kind of like I think the real physical experiences can usually take over easily and overwhelm certain senses and aspects because you focus on one thing or the other. And with when just putting this digital distance, kind of we heightens different narrative, and we basically just like to curate and make it a little bit more intentional, kind of get specific subjects that we want to talk about. And I think this is where technology helps us the most. And apart from the fact that we're like, of course, like we're so just fascinated with it, but I think there's something really cool about technology because it's curated. Well, if it's Instagram or it's VR or it's a film or it's a game, it's pretty well curated. And at the same time, it fictionalizes on reality. And I think that's a really cool thing. That's a really key element. And I think you can use it badly or good. That's not the point here, but the point is that it can do that. And that's great. Okay. Do you have questions, or I can go through something else?
Actually, yeah. I mean, because you mentioned Lebanon several times, and at the moment, of course, it's kind of going through perhaps the largest of its multiple crises in history. But I'm kind of curious, I think we're a little bit curious about the first project you showed, kind of taking this autoethnographic approach, kind of almost like using technology as a form of self-analysis in a way, and scouting and kind of figuring out yourselves. And then you talked a little bit about how that kind of starts to maybe network with a larger community. And I'm kind of, well, I think we're curious about anytime that happens, and you mentioned this thing of it being maybe used for good or bad is not necessarily the question, but there are, let's say, rules to the game or limitation, like Instagram, as you mentioned, will curate content, eliminate things, block things. I'm kind of curious about how this maybe takes place in these types of interactive environments.
I think that's an amazing question. Okay, I love the way you put it. Yeah, I guess you're super right. Yeah, in a way, I guess how we try to do it is that basically instead of having, like, it's usually not a completely fully open world. It's usually just some scenarios that you can jump from and to. So you can jump and watch this woman kind of with her dog and trying to figure out, and then you can jump out and see the ocean and how the thing. So like they're pretty kind of small narrative cutscenes, let's say, but since they're in VR, they kind of around each other. And I think that's also an interesting thing. Cutscenes in VR is really cool. Let's talk about this. But yeah, so basically we're taking like small narrative scenes and moments, and we're just putting them together. And I think the point here is that you can only speak about what you're seeing. So you can only have a discussion, or you can only kind of talk with someone in VR with you about this specific topic. Otherwise, it just doesn't go through. So I think, yes, we do. I like your point, and we've always wondered like if it should be like this or it should be more open, but I think this way we just keep it at least around this, and then, well, whatever opinion or kind of ways you're looking at it, because I think like two different people from two different countries can just come into this VR experience, experience those moments together and have completely different kind of ways of looking at them based on their experiences, based on like how they see the world. And I think that's kind of the main point, is how to take kind of a specific narrative moment that we're recreating, and then for people, because we usually, it's a multiplayer, everything we do is usually multiplayer. Also, we usually do it virtually, but for example, in the case of the project we were looking at before, it was kind of physically. So we tried to keep this multiplayer thing at a certain kind of aspect. So yeah, so people would join in the same VR experience, jump from one moment, one narrative moment to the other, and have to speak about it and have to kind of figure out. It's similar to a forum, I guess, in a way, how a forum works. Like you have a certain topic, you have a certain kind of like elements that are being like kind of talked about in a specific way, and then you have people kind of bringing their own element to that. And I think, yeah, do you want to talk about this more?
Yeah, I think the physical exhibition that you're referring to, the one that we had people go in the car, was really at the start of COVID. And we were invited by LA Forum to produce, to be part of a group exhibition speculating on LA in 2020. And we wanted to create that VR experience, immersive experience, but because of COVID, we couldn't. So our reflex was to think about the drive-in, the American drive-in restaurant, and to think about that as an exhibition space. So people will drive in and out and be safe and stay in their car while being able to experiment something close to an immersion into a space. But I think the second question that you're asking now is about interaction in digital work. Why do we call these movies that we're looking at games? Because these are all reels of the actual game where you could go in and there's all these different agents, so different like entities that you can interact with, and each one of them will inform you about an aspect of their life, about the way that they're experiencing this landscape. So it's also for us, really the type of work we do is always like bottom up. So we really want to think about the different perspectives out there, the different point of view, and bring them together in a space where you're allowed to go and ask and understand these different points of view without directing our main protagonist, our main character, or the person having the experience, the user, to a specific goal. This is why, it's open-ended. This is why it's not as didactic the way you experience the game, but it's really a place where you can go ask questions. And as Vivian says, it's a forum. You can have discussions within it, and we have live events about, talking about different climate issues within that game environment. So it's also, we of course have to speak about our aesthetics, because we are very interested in the fact that our aesthetics will always be something that looks beautiful, that is appealing. And this is because we think that it will draw the most amount of people to have discussion with through its aesthetic, maybe first. That's still debatable. That's something we might change our mind on in a few years. But for now, it's really, it's been like very central to the work we do.
So I like this. Yeah, I like what you said. I think we like to take on the kind of explorer position. I guess that's mainly, I like that. What else do we have to say about this? Okay, let's see. I guess I can. What?
No, I mean, I kind of, definitely a thought comes to mind, I think, when we're looking at this work and the things that you're talking about. There's maybe a kind of sensitivity to certain types of issues. And maybe that's part of the idea of how you guys kind of draw from your own experiences. And maybe one of the questions that we have that comes to mind is about how dealing with students, for example, maybe some of them, to how are certain maybe topics approached with students, maybe some that don't have a kind of a history or an encounter with some of these types of issues, and how does the teasing out of certain topics, or maybe the evolution of their perspective on a certain issue, work, and does maybe working through this world building or gameplay kind of feedback into their, yeah, I think we're kind of curious from this aspect.
I know Yara is the teacher here, and I'll let you talk, but I think everyone comes with a certain baggage or comes with a certain background, and they can, I mean, there's no way that there isn't like one thing that you can talk about. And I think I love the fact that each one of us can talk about their own experiences, because just by sharing your own small experiences, we can just have so much diversity in a lot of the work, instead of focusing on the kind of what we're supposed to be looking at right now, or like the kind of Western, not to criticize it, I love it, but like the overall kind of like culture. I think it's great for each one of us to just like say like, hey, actually, I have some experience with this, and let's talk about it. And maybe you have another opinion about it. And I don't think anyone doesn't have this somehow.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. Like we, of course, have our own baggage and our own political and social interests, but I think everybody does. And this is really what, why I love teaching, because I get to have this discussion with all of these people and thinking about what matters to them. And, how can we think about architecture? How can we think about that architecture through our own understanding, and what can you bring to the discipline, if you want to call it the discipline of architecture, and how can we extend the way we talk about architecture today? And this is why I think Vivian and I, when we talk about our work and maybe our work that is closer to architecture per se, we talk about design through scripting, we talk about algorithmic environment design. And what you see on the screen is an example of a tech seminar that we ran at UCLA with the students. And you can see that we are introducing new notions and new tools, but we're really redirecting the way they're thinking about architecture. And here, for example, it's through the flow of people through a building, through gathering data and being and understand real-time feedback from all of these software. And this all are the same. It's important to say, I think, that all of these are the same software, the one that produced the results that we looked at a second ago, and this one are the same type of tools. And I think it's also a way for us to empower students and really push them to discover something in their research, in their architectural research, that is beyond what is given to them. So I would say we start on a ground of what are you interested in, what motivates you politically, socially, and so on, and then how can we bring that into architecture? Because I think these political questions, are extremely important in architecture, and we tend to have some difficulty talking about them. So I think this is how I see our work linking into academia and the research I do with students.
Since we are seeing like some kind of simulation of behaviors, probably you could explain us what is the difference between the users and the behavior of the players or of the different characters inside of the video games or the simulations that you were showing?
Should I go with it? Yep, sure, I can explain this. I think the behavior, I think we've built kind of, I would like to say, we kind of built like a toolbox that would let us always not be in control of what we're doing, if that makes sense. It's like we've tried to come up with ways to kind of censor us for having too much of an opinion or having too much of a kind of strong take in things. And so basically, for example, simulations, behavior, how we let our characters run through, we basically usually just try to script them, and then whatever they do or they think, like our characters, our digital characters, whatever they think their narrative is going, it's going to happen. And this is why we use the simulation and the behavioral. I think it just lets the world just be a little bit more real. And even if it's not very similar to the real, but we've already taken, so we usually take, like technically speaking, we usually take some kind of narrative and we translate it into actions that these people are going to do. So for example, I don't know, there's a mother that needs to feed her child, and she needs to go get the water from a well. I'm probably just over doing it, but that's the story. And so we basically give her some actions or some kind of like there's a plan, and she has like some actions, but then she decides how she wants to go about it, or in this case, the algorithm decides how she wants to go about it, how long does she want to stay there, how full is the well, can she get the water? And so these things we don't have kind of control over. And I think this is how we try to build it, so that we never have control, so that these kind of small issues like, oh no, there's no time for this or something like this come up, so that there's even more to talk about within this narrative. So I think we just try to come up with the main idea of the narrative and then run it through the simulation, give that, they're called agents. So we give the agents kind of the main plan that they have to go through. And then it's kind of up to them how they're gonna go through the work. And I think when the user comes in, like the person who wants to play the game or who wants to, when they're exploring these things, it kind of seems a little bit more real, I guess, or similar to what they're used to, because these people are trying to make their own decisions. They're trying to make, even though they are still following the main narrative. The user can control whatever they want to do. They can, they can walk around, they can interact with these agents. They can also, for example, slow down the progress of these agents. So if a user kind of interacted with one of the agents, then it would probably maybe slow down the other things that this agent has to do. Maybe it's this, I'm going too technically. Okay. So yeah, I think it's really important for us to keep this flow going. This is how I want to say it, I think, about simulation.
Yeah, I think your remark about is it too technical is such a remark we have all the time, because the work we do is extremely technical. Like all of what you see is done through scripting. It's, it's like there's a back end to what if happening, but we always want to speak about it through the aesthetic, through the effects that it produces and what kind of community it creates. And this is why it's a bit difficult to juggle both, I think, because the technical side is also extremely interesting. And of course, this is what it links to the result. And everything is interconnected. And all of these agents that run on machine learning basically are deciding some aspect of what they do for themselves. And this is like the tools that we were using for that specifically were inspired by, I was teaching with Greglin last year and discussion with him about agents' behavior and what Deborah, you just mentioned. And it's really taken from that and seeing what is the aspect in 2021 of that tool and how can we use that and incorporate that contemporary and super, out of the oven tool into academia, into our practice. And this is why it's too technical, but it's the only way to explain, because it's a very technical issue. And yeah, I think we'll always, have that back and forth in our work between the effect and the visuals and the way it communicates with the larger audience. And then the back, which is like the technology and everything that we're interested in that produces this result is actually extremely, extremely technical and maybe boring for a larger audience. But this is what I think fuels our our political and social interests are fueled with this technological knowledge, and then it results in this aesthetics and production in form of VR, of simulation, of game, of films, and so on.
That's lovely to hear, because I think even if it might be too technical, there's something very fascinating about these agents, and then maybe the idea that you're kind of interacting with them or participating with them, but in a sense, not even knowing if they're actually maybe even agents at some point. You're kind of like this weird Turing test, which starts to raise different questions about the types of intelligence that these things have, and then the kinds of, even when they start to maybe exhibit different types of behaviors, that feeds into, maybe taps into some other human element that maybe wouldn't be predicted from another human. In a weird way, sometimes it feels like even communicating with humans, they're starting to get a little bit more robotic, and somehow some agents can be a little bit more human. So thank you so much for giving us a peek or even a very in-depth review of your work and the work you do with students, technically and aesthetically and politically. I believe you guys also have a guest lined up for the next session. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is how it works, right? You invite us, you were invited, and then we invite someone else. So we're excited to be joined in 2 weeks by It's Gallo from his Instagram profile from Office CA. It's Gallo Canizares. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. And he'll be joining us in 2 weeks to discuss their practice, which also relates to building software and using game engines to, as in academia and in their own professional practice, which is really great because I feel like we're forming this network of all of us being interested in similar tools and conversation. But thank you so much. It's been great to be in discussion with you this morning.
Thank you.
Much. Thank you so much. That was great.
That was a lot of fun. Thank you guys.
Yeah, sure thing.